Hello and welcome back to the Ruth Fit podcast. Very, very happy to be here with you today. Hoping there's not too much background noise. I've just had to start again recording this because I think it was like a house alarm started going off and then the dogs in the neighbourhood started going off as well. I'm hoping it's not going to be too noisy because I decided to come and sit at the front of the house where I can be outside. We'll see how this goes. Anyway, I hope you're all well. It's been a bit of a crazy week for my family this past week because it was a week ago today, my youngest broke his arm here in Barbados. He fell off his skateboard and he did it in such a way that it's meant that he needed surgery, which was a little bit of navigation, but we got it sorted and he had surgery on Thursday and he's recovering well from that. So all good news. And actually I did reflect a little bit around that time because I didn't feel too stressed about it. And I think the reason I didn't feel too stressed, and I haven't always been this way, so I feel like I've got better at it as I've got older, but I didn't feel too stressed about it because I only had the information I had to deal with. Like worrying about what ifs and maybes and so on wasn't going to help me in that immediate moment. And in fact, there was a quote, I don't remember it exactly, but I remember reading a fiction book a while back. And I think it was a husband said to his wife, let's not borrow problems from tomorrow to use today. And I think that's kind of it, isn't it? Like deal with what you have, be prepared so that you have a plan, but worrying about the maybes from tomorrow doesn't need to be something that's going to help today. So that was kind of I guess a strategy I accidentally employed. But anyway, it's all looking good. We are just having to go in for another appointment on Tuesday to have his cast redone. I should probably get on with the main topic of today's podcast. It's something that I chat about a lot with my clients. It's something a little bit different from our normal podcast chat, which is often more mindset based, but I think it's an important one to do a deep dive into, and that is protein. And you might be rolling your eyes thinking, if I hear another thing about protein, and that is likely because you've heard coaches banging on about how important it is. So what I want to do today is look at how true that is. Is it just another wellness trend that we're falling for? We're going to look at what it actually does, how it might be more important when you're in your 40s and beyond, some common myths that we're going to debunk, approaching protein when you're vegan and vegetarian, amongst other things. So we're going to do a real deep dive into protein today. And I think it's important to start with what protein actually does, because it's more than just muscle food. It's very easy to think that it's just for those guys in the gym, but it does also help us with so many other functions, like repairing our cells and tissues, making hormones and enzymes, keeping your immune system working well, our skin, hair and nail health. Yes, also going to be helping us with our muscle and strength. And it also plays a huge role in our appetite regulation. So if you are someone who always feels like you're hungry or snacking between meals, then protein can really help fix that. I remember years ago, I used to try and save my calories so that I could have a glass of wine in the evening and a Kit Kat. And I didn't know then about the thermic effect of foods and that not all calories are equal. So don't worry if you don't know what the thermic effect is. I'm going to explain that now. It's the amount of energy that your body uses to digest, absorb and metabolize what you eat. So different macros use different amounts of energy in this process. Carbs are the quickest and easiest to digest. We use very little energy to break them down. So we absorb around 95 to 98% of the calories that they provide. Fats are a bit slower to digest and slightly more energy intensive, but they're still pretty efficient. We absorb around 95% of the calories from fat. And protein then is the most metabolically demanding, so around 20 to 30% of the calories in protein are used just to process it, which means you only get around 70 to 80% of the calories for use after digestion. This makes protein incredibly effective for fat loss. It not only keeps you fuller for longer, but your body also burns more calories simply by processing it. Don't necessarily take that to mean that you can just double your calories if you're eating protein. It's just a very handy fat loss tool. And I thought I'd actually give you an example from my own life, because this was a pattern that I repeated for years, and I'm sure that many people out there did it. Because there are times where I completely skipped breakfast in the morning because I wasn't that hungry, and I'd figured that I'd save the calories for later in the day when I knew I would be more tempted to snack. And then other times, if I did have breakfast, I'd just grab a bit of toast on the go, right? It felt light, it felt efficient, it saved me time, it felt like a smart move. But the problem was that if I skipped breakfast, I'd find myself picking more into the afternoon and evening. And if I had something like toast, I'd be hungry again, like an hour later, just like raiding the cupboards, looking for snacks and then wondering why I couldn't seem to have the willpower to not pick. And luckily now I understand why. Either I didn't have any breakfast at all, which meant my body was playing catch up for the rest of the day, or there was no protein in that meal, just quick fuel, in and out, nothing to help me feel full or steady. So when I started eating a proper breakfast, and by proper, I mean something that was nutrient and protein rich, it made such a huge difference. I suddenly felt fuller for longer. My energy lasted longer. I didn't feel like I was chasing food all day. I was able to make calmer decisions around food because I wasn't starving. And this is actually backed up by research because a higher protein breakfast has been shown to reduce cravings and support better blood sugar control and even contribute to fat loss when it's part of a consistent pattern. And some studies actually suggest around 25 to 30 grams of protein at breakfast. I tend to aim for around 25, but it made such a big difference for such a small change. And it is something I see time and time again with my clients, just adding in breakfast and making it one that includes plenty of protein, fiber and so on, is going to help them feel more in control and less hungry later on, and far less reliant on willpower to stay on track. But, and I want to add a but here, it can be very hard to trust yourself to do this. And I know this from experience, because if you've been an evening, afternoon snacker for years and years and years, you will believe likely that that is always the way it's going to be. And you will worry that if you eat more earlier on in the day, then you're going to be eating the breakfast and you're still going to be snacking, and then your calories are going to be out of control. So you do just need to give it a go, trust me, stay calm, plan out that breakfast, and then notice, make sure you do take time to notice how you're feeling. And if you are snacking later in the day, reflect back and think, what did I have earlier? Could this snacking actually be just me catching up on the food that I haven't eaten already today? Have I eaten enough nutrients? Have I eaten enough in total? Because often we think it's just lack of willpower, but it's actually just our body playing catch up. So as we get older, our bodies change. I'm sure you might have noticed this. And it's not just hormonally, but metabolically too. So from around the age of 30, we naturally begin to lose muscle mass. Do not worry, if you're somebody that is working those muscles, you're going to be slowing down that. And I'm also going to say here that it's never too late to start building muscle, but we naturally begin to lose muscle mass. And then that loss does speed up in our 40s and 50s, especially during menopause, during and after menopause. And this can be one of the reasons that you'll feel like your body has changed, right? Even if you haven't really changed the way that you're eating. Things feel different, your clothes fit differently, energy dips happen more often, and you might feel like your body's working against you a bit. And you've probably heard that losing muscle slows down your metabolism. In fact, it's one of the things that people will put again and again as a reason to strength train. If you strength train, you're going to speed up your metabolism and burn more calories at rest. That's something I see a lot. And while that is true, the actual difference in terms of calorie burn isn't huge on its own at all. So muscle is more metabolically active than fat, but it's not a massive calorie burner. So a kilo of muscle burns around 10 to 15 calories a day at rest. So where it does make a difference, because it does make a difference, isn't in the calorie burn, it's in the way you move through your day. When you've got more muscle, everything is going to feel a bit easier, you're going to move more, feel stronger, and you're more likely to stay active. And that is where the real metabolic impact comes from. Plus, when muscle loss is combined with hormonal changes, stress, and the kind of busy lives that many women at this stage of life lead, it can start to feel like everything is a bit harder. And this is where protein really matters. Protein is going to help slow down that muscle loss. It gives your body the tools it needs to hold on to the muscle, especially if you're someone who's exercising and lifting weights or working on fat loss. And this was something else I noticed when I started including protein at breakfast and focusing on meals over just picking throughout the day, is I had been strength training for years by this point, but I actually suddenly felt like I was gaining a bit more muscle, but I wasn't gaining fat. I just started feeling like I was just gaining a bit more muscle. And I think it was because I wasn't giving my body what it needed to support that muscle growth during my recovery prior to that. And it is also, as we've said, going to help with your blood sugar, support your immune system, and help you feel fuller for longer, so that you're not constantly battling cravings or those energy dips. And then the knock-on effect of that is more energy, better food decisions, and feeling a bit more like yourself again. It can make such a huge difference. But it wouldn't be a podcast about protein without actually tackling some of the most common myths I hear about it. I think it's no wonder that people are feeling confused because there are a lot of mixed messages out there. Some advice is saying you're eating too much protein, others are saying you're not eating enough, adding a few headlines, these TikTok trends, and a couple of experts on different podcasts, and it feels like you don't know what to believe anymore. And we tend to only see the extreme views doing the rounds on social media. So myth number 1 is you only need 0.8 grams of protein per kilo of body weight. And this does come up a lot. And technically it's true. That number is the official RDA. But what people don't realize about that is that the RDA is set as the bare minimum to avoid deficiency. It's not based on what's going to be optimal for your health, strength, fat loss, or aging well, which is what I definitely view as being important. It's definitely not going to be designed for active women in their 40s and beyond. So for clients I work with, 0.8 grams per kilo usually isn't going to be enough to feel satisfied, support training, or help preserve muscle. So it's more of a baseline than a goal. Most women over 40 are going to function better in the range of 1.4 to 1.8 grams per kilo of body weight. And to keep things simple, I often just set a minimum target of around 100 grams of protein per day for most of my clients. If they're not used to eating much protein, this is a great foundation to aim for. And we can get there just by aiming for that 25 grams of protein or more per meal, often with the evening meal naturally pushing it upwards. But one snack can handle the rest if we want it to. It's not about chasing high numbers for the sake of it, but getting enough to support what you actually want your body to do. Myth number 2, too much protein is bad for your kidneys. I'm not sure if you've heard this one before, but it has been kind of floating around for years. The only time that this really is going to matter is if you already have a diagnosed kidney condition. In healthy people, even quite high protein diets have been studied extensively and shown to be completely safe. So there's no evidence that eating more protein is going to harm your kidneys if they're functioning normally. In fact, protein does a lot more good than it does harm. It helps maintain that muscle, support your bone health, and plays a role in everything from mood and hormones to immune function. So unless your doctor has told you otherwise, you really don't need to worry about protein hurting your kidneys. Myth number 3, you can only absorb 30 grams of protein at once. And this is one I have heard a lot, usually with someone saying, so if I eat more than that, it's just getting wasted. And no, it's not. Your body absorbs all the protein you eat. What people are usually talking about is how much protein your body can use in that moment for muscle building. And yes, that tends to max out around 25 to 35 grams depending on the person, but the rest doesn't go to waste. It still gets used for other important jobs. Protein has loads of roles beyond muscle. And the reason we'll have heard this before is because the people that have been talking about protein are mainly concerned with building muscle. But I've mentioned already, it's going to also be helping us repair tissues, make hormones, support our immune system. So please don't worry about trying to split your day into exactly 30-gram portions. It's far more helpful to look at your overall intake and aim for regular protein throughout the day. Myth number 4, protein is just a fitness industry fad. There's this idea that protein has become trendy or that it's something only gym people obsess over. But actually the science around protein isn't new. It's just that it's finally making it into mainstream conversations, especially for women. We're seeing more women who are paying attention to strength and caring about aging well, they're lifting weights. Couldn't be happier because I know that we can change the way we age by focusing on this. And the fact that we're paying attention is where protein also becomes really valuable, because it isn't just about turning into a bodybuilder. It's about keeping our body strong, supporting our energy and our mood, and maintaining our independence for as long as possible. We can change the way we age, and I love that. But protein is part of it. It's not the whole thing, but it's part of it. Myth number 5 is everyone is already eating too much protein. This one actually was mentioned to me a while back from a client who'd listened to a podcast. It's become fairly common in the media because of the rise of plant-based eating, gut health conversations, and longevity messaging. So Dr. Tim Spector, for example, did say this on Diary of a CEO interview, that many people were obsessed with protein and probably eating more than they need. And yes, some people in the fitness space are consuming amounts like 200 grams plus daily, which really isn't necessary for the average person. But for women 40 plus, especially those who are aiming to maintain muscle, improve strength, support fat loss, and manage hunger, research consistently shows that we're more likely to be under-eating protein, particularly at breakfast, rather than overdoing it. So it's not just that everyone is eating too much, it's that we need to consider context. The average woman over 40 isn't smashing protein shakes all day. She's more likely having toast for breakfast and wondering why she's tired and snacky by 11, like I was. So yes, protein is being talked about more, and that is a good thing. But saying we're all eating too much is missing the nuance. However, there is a flip side, and I do wonder whether he was alluding to this when he did that podcast, and that is when people start focusing on protein, especially if they're trying to hit a certain number, it's very easy to unintentionally neglect the other nutrients. I sometimes see clients get to the end of the day with their protein goal ticked off, but very little fibre, not much colour on their plate, and maybe not enough healthy fats. So while protein is incredibly helpful, it shouldn't take over the whole plate. It works best as part of a balanced, nutrient-dense diet, and that is one that includes fibre-rich foods, fruit and veg, whole grains, and enough food overall to feel satisfied and energized. We do still need our other macros. This is just part of a diet. And I also think that if we're getting our protein in our meals and it's come from a complete protein source where we can, then that is easier to do. Myth number 6, high protein diets shorten your lifespan. This one usually comes from longevity research and sometimes from mouse studies suggesting that eating less protein might extend your life. But actually, when we look at human data, especially for older adults, the opposite is often showing up. So people who eat higher protein diets tend to hold on to muscle, stay stronger for longer, and have fewer falls and better quality of life. So it's also important to look at the type of diet overall. As I've said, a high protein diet full of whole foods and fibre is very different from one that's just processed meat and zero vegetables. So context, again, really, really matters. The diet that is mentioned again and again for overall health is a Mediterranean diet, which is less of a diet and more of a lifestyle. And that is getting in those different types of protein, getting in plenty of whole grains, fruit, veg, fibre, and then the other foods of more calorie-dense foods and alcohol in moderation. So myth number 7 is one really for the vegans and vegetarians out there, and it's that you have to combine plant proteins at every meal. And this is one of those outdated ideas that is still floating around. It used to be said that if you didn't eat rice and beans together, for example, you weren't getting a complete protein. But that's not quite how our body works. So as long as you're eating a variety of plant-based proteins over the course of the day, your body can piece together the amino acid it needs. So you don't need to obsess over food combining in every meal. That sounds stressful. So if you're eating things like tofu, lentils, chickpeas, quinoa, nuts, seeds regularly, you're doing fine. That's great. So there you go. 7 of the biggest protein myths and what the research actually shows us. And if you have any more, please do ask me them. Put it in the comments or message me on Instagram. But I really hope that that clears up some of the noise and helps you feel more confident about how protein can support you without the fear, the confusion, or the fad social media mentality around it. So how much protein do you actually need? We did look at this a little bit in the myths. The RDA, as I said, sits at 0.8 grams per kilo of body weight. But remember, that is just the minimum to avoid deficiency. It's definitely not designed to help you feel your best, to feel energy, to support fat loss or build strength. I would see it as a starting point and not a destination. So most women over 40 feel and function better in the range of 1.4 to 1.8 grams per kilo of body weight. That range supports strength, recovery, and fat loss without being overwhelming. In some cases, like if you're training intensely, competing in strength or endurance events, or going through a very targeted fat loss phase under guidance, think here like bodybuilder type thing, then up to 2.2 grams per kilogram can be helpful. But this isn't a case of the more the better. For most active women who want sustainable results and more energy, staying in the 1.4 to 1.8 per kilogram range works really well. Going higher might not give you any extra benefit, and in some cases it can just add unnecessary stress, which I never ever want. I'm all about making things easier, and we don't want it to lead to decision fatigue or crowd out other important nutrients like fibre and healthy fats. So to put that into perspective, if you weigh 70 kilograms, that means aiming for somewhere around 100 to 125 grams of protein a day. and possibly a little more depending on your lifestyle and your goals. And that might sound a lot at first, but it's completely manageable when you spread it across the day. So around 30 grams at breakfast, or 25 to 30 grams at breakfast, same at lunch and the same at dinner. And then you could get another 10 to 20 from snacks like Greek yogurt, protein shake. You don't have to be perfect. This isn't about hitting exact numbers every single day. But if you're getting close to that target most days, and you are doing brilliantly, and your body is definitely going to thank you for it. And you're likely to feel more satisfied and see better results and recover faster from workouts and so on. I do think that knowing this is key as well. Knowledge is power. It can help you look back at your day and go, that explains why I've been more hungry today. I know that there's been times where I've gone for afternoon tea. And I know that afternoon tea is not about hitting your protein. So each year, me and my son go for afternoon tea. That meal, although it's very filling at the time, the next day I can often be really hungry, really, really hungry. And I just haven't had enough nutrients. But you know what? I don't beat myself up and think, what's wrong with me? I have no willpower. I can look back and be like, right, I didn't get enough nutrients yesterday. My body's just craving something. Knowledge is definitely power. So you might have heard that you should spread your protein evenly throughout the day. And that is definitely a helpful strategy. It's one that I would still recommend, which I'll go on to in a minute. But there is newer research that shows that while even distribution is useful, especially for older adults, it's not essential as long as your total daily intake is high enough. That being said, like I said, I still encourage clients to include protein in each meal because it's going to help with all those other things. But I do think that knowing that you don't have to be perfect is important here, because if you are going out for dinner and you know that you can't get any protein in at that meal because somebody's cooking a vegetarian meal for you or whatever, I don't think you need to feel as stressed, because you can look at your daily intake. So yeah, total protein is going to be the king, but spreading it across the day can make everything else easier. It can help reduce those energy crashes mid-morning or mid-afternoon. You're less likely to find yourself rummaging in the cupboards at 9 p.m. or constantly thinking about food. It also supports that muscle repair throughout the day, especially if you're active or doing strength workouts. And plus, I might add, when you start your day with that decent hit of protein, like at breakfast, it often sets the tone, right? Clients will often tell me that once they've had a balanced breakfast with protein, they snack less, feel better, and they're making more intentional choices throughout the day. So while the science doesn't say you must hit 30 grams per meal, most women would feel noticeably better when they do. And like I said, there's studies out there that are supporting this as well. You don't need to be rigid about it, but aiming for protein at each meal is one of the simplest ways to make fat loss, strength and energy feel easier. And if you're on a plant-based diet, you can absolutely hit your protein needs. It just takes a little bit more planning and intention. There are brilliant plant-based versions out there. Some of my go-to suggestions for clients would include lentils, chickpeas, any kind of beans, which are also so high in fiber as well, tofu, tempeh and edamame. Edamame are super high in protein. And then you've got quinoa, which is complete protein, buckwheat, oats, seitan, I never know how to say that, seeds and nut butters. Plant-based protein powders are available as well, which can be made from soy, pea, rice, or a blend of all of those. And the key with plant-based diet is going to be variety. So unlike animal proteins, most plant sources aren't complete proteins, meaning they don't contain all of the 9 essential amino acids in the right proportions. But that's not a problem as long as you're eating a range of foods across the day. So yes, we mentioned about rice and beans or hummus and pitta. They don't have to be together, but your body can combine them to get what it needs. And while it might take a little more thought to hit high protein targets, it's definitely doable. So here's roughly what 20 grams of protein could look like. Could be 1 cup of cooked lentils, which is around 18 grams, 100 grams of firm tofu, which is around 10 grams, a couple of tablespoons of peanut butter is around 8 grams. Now that is going to be higher in calories as well, so you do need to be aware of that. A sprinkle of seeds, a handful of edamame, a scoop of plant-based protein powder can all add up quickly. In fact, I made a lovely salad which was chickpea based and I put some beans in with it, and I think that was like 16 grams on its own. And if you were just to add some tofu or something to that, or even a couple of eggs to that, then it's going to bring it up. So if you're aiming for fat loss, you might want to focus on the leaner plant proteins like legumes, tofu, tempeh and protein powders, and then use the higher fat sources like nut seeds and nut butters as delicious extras rather than your main protein hit. But the bottom line is that plant-based protein doesn't mean protein poor. With a little variety and some strategic swaps, and the same principles of building meals around protein, then you're definitely going to be on the right. So to bring it all together now, protein is essential, and even more so after 40. It's not just for the gym goers, the gym bros. It helps with energy, fat loss, recovery, and feeling full. It's going to help us age well as well. You definitely don't need to be perfect, but hitting around 100 grams plus per day is going to be a fab starting point. And spreading it across the day is going to help with appetite and energy. And it's totally possible even if you're a vegan or veggie. So if you enjoyed this podcast, please do leave a comment, like, share it with that friend who's perhaps always wondering what to eat for breakfast and why that jam on toast is never quite hitting the spot. And you can find me on Instagram at Ruth McFit. If you've got any questions, I would love to hear from you. I'm always happy to chat. And if you're interested in joining us in the no carb cake method, then you can head to www.ruthmcfit.com for more info on coaching options. It has been a pleasure as always. Until next time, goodbye.